We just talked about the fact that having too much choice makes it difficult for people to compute the outcome. What are the effects of choice? We document 5 different kinds of effects in our research. The first thing that you'll see here is that when you give people a lot of choice, they end up not choosing at all, or they choose to defer their participation. In the domain of retirement savings, the common finding is that the moment you give people lots of ways in which they can actually spend their money, lots of funds they can choose from, they choose to not participate in a fund at all because they have difficulty making a choice. The second thing that you'll often see happening is people tend to make choices that are conservative, that are safe, because they want to minimize the potential for regret. The bigger the choice set, the more likely are they to go with a conservative option. The third thing that you'll see happening is the power of status quo or defaults or recommendations. When I have too many options to choose from, I'm most likely going to look at you and say, well, what do you suggest? Or I look for simplifying cues, which is the most popular product in your menu, which is the most top-selling item in your list, and so on and so forth. Did a study with a graduate student a few years back. We compared patrons in restaurants that had a fixed price menu, but in one restaurant there were 6 items in which people could choose from. In the other restaurant there were 30 items. And we looked at people that dined as dyads, 2 people that came together, and we asked the following simple question. What % of people said, I'm going to eat what he's eating? And it turns out that when you gave people a longer menu, the second diner was much more likely to choose exactly what his or her partner chose. Again, pointing to the fact that as decision-making became more complex, people resorted to a simplifying heuristic. The fourth effect is, again, the reliance on peer choices. We tend to look at what other people choose. Those other people could be someone we dine with. It could be a celebrity endorser. It could be something that an intelligent agent recommends to us. John Gorville and I did a number of experiments where we looked at the effect of overchoice on consumer decision making. And what we documented was a phenomenon that we call brand defection. Consider 2 brands. Brand A has 1 offering in a given product category. Let's say toothpaste. Brand B has 15 offerings in the same category. Let's say it's a toothpaste, it whitens, the other one has chloride, the third one has fluoride, and so on and so forth. And what we find is beyond a certain number of options, once you get to 7, 8, 9, or 10, people said, gee, I can't make up my mind there. I'm just going to stick with a simple option. So people defect brands. They defect to the brand that has a fewer number of alternatives. And finally, we also looked at situations in which consumers were given the choice between 3 variants of the same product. A stripped-down version, a fully equipped version, and a middle-of-the-road option. Think about a car. You could get a basic model, you could get a bells and whistles, everything included model, or you could get a model that has a little bit of the everything, but not all of it. And what we find is that as the number of options in the middle go up, people tend to gravitate more towards the basic or the fully loaded. They simply can't trade off subsets of the options, and so they decide they want it all or they want nothing. Now, if in fact it is true that people suffer from overchoice, and it is true that if you give people too much information, they have problems processing it, what can we do to help people make better choices? We identify 5 different strategies in this regard. The most obvious one is to streamline choices. Think about your offerings, think about products that you really think add value, and keep those and only those in your product mix. If there are products that are not doing well, if there are options that are not popular, consider dropping them. Second, help consumers understand their own preferences and help them make the right computation. If you could think about a simple shopping bot that allows a consumer to understand the relative value that they place on different attributes and allow the bot to compute the total value of the product and make recommendations, that would help the consumers a long way. The third strategy is to organize options. And you could organize options in a number of different ways. Think about mutual funds. Think about mortgages. Think about even product categories like cereals. Oftentimes you go to a store and you are asked to make a choice between low-fat and regular options. Within the low-fat options, you might have further choices or further categories. And the moment you try and organize all of your complex alternatives within each of those categories, it becomes easier for a consumer to navigate and drill down towards a particular choice. So now they're making a sequential set of choices rather than making one out of 160 different options. Likewise, a similar strategy is to encourage what we call attribute-based decision making. Remember the Chinese takeout that I talked about before? Here's how we finally helped this man solve his problem. We came to the realization that at the end of the day, the 180 items on his menu were a combination of 4 or 5 different factors. What was the style of cooking? What meat was used? What was the level of spiciness? What sort of noodle was used? And what sort of vegetables were added? And if you simply asked people to pick, along each of these questions, 1 out of 4, which meat do you want? I could give you chicken, I could give you fish, I could give you lamb or pork, right? It becomes easier for them to answer those 5 questions at the level of each attribute and choose 1 out of 5 times, than to choose 1 out of 180. And finally, think about outsourcing decision-making to agents. Who are these agents? These agents could be experts. And in fact, people do this a lot. In the field of medical advice, for example, most consumers do not make up their own minds about whether they want treatment A or treatment B. They simply ask their doctor to help them choose. Likewise, you could have a doctor for your financial well-being. You could have a doctor for your weight loss program, as well as for your exercise regimen. Outsourcing decisions is a perfect way of making sure that you can safeguard yourself from overload and fatigue.